So God is the one who, at the end of days, on Judgment Day, what Judaism calls Yom HaDin, he's going to render a final verdict among all mankind. Are you judged worthy to be in my kingdom? God the King is going to say. Or are you judged unworthy? Are you in or are you out? And this is going to be decided based on the standard that the judge sets up. What is that standard? It's established in his righteous teachings, the writings of the king, right? The teachings of the king that we learned about a few weeks back. It's the Torah itself that establishes the righteous standard, and that standard dictates that faith in the righteous King Messiah is what grants you entry into the kingdom or excludes you from the kingdom, right? Are you in or are you out? This is a good time for me to ask you, as you're watching this YouTube video, as you're listening to these iTunes podcasts, these MP3 studies, is the King in your heart? Have you made a decision to accept the King into your heart? I ask you to consider this message of the King, the gospel, the good news. Have you confessed Jesus as Lord? Paul's going to tell us in Romans that if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you'll be saved. It's with the heart that man believes unto righteousness, and it's with the mouth that you confess unto salvation. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. This is the good news that we can accept, that the King extends to us as members, as citizens of planet Earth. Whether Jew or Gentile, it doesn't matter. Won't you accept the King today? Won't you accept the King into your heart so that you can be found in his kingdom? I pray that you do. Let's continue in our study. Let's look at Matthew 25 as we turn. Do we want to turn to Yeshua as judge just yet? No, I think I've got one more. I think I should have an Acts passage. Give me a second here. I've got my tabs out of order. Let's move this tab. I think this is the tab that I want to look at. We looked at Matthew. Nope. We want to go like that. All right, let's look at Acts 10 for a split second. We're still looking at God as judge. Acts 10 verse 42. The writer Luke writes this, and he commanded us to preach to the people and to testify that he is the one appointed by God to be judge of the living and the dead. No, this is a Yeshua. I guess my little notes there were not correct. Okay, so this is actually Yeshua's, the one who's being the judge. So let's move that back over to Acts. I apologize about that. Yeah. All right. So let's begin looking at the Son as the judge as well. So we're going to transition now. God is judge in the Tanakh. But now what we're going to find is that the gospel establishes that Yeshua carries this role as judge as well. In this overlap of roles, does it definitely establish him as God just because he's judge as well? Well, not automatically. I don't think so. In other words, does this logic automatically preclude that Jesus is God just because God is spoken of as judge in the Bible and Jesus is spoken of as judge in other places? Not necessarily, because we could have God the Father handing judgment over to the Son on his behalf, and it's still the authority that comes from God vested in Yeshua to wear this robe of judgment and therefore to judge all men. And we could say that Yeshua is judge, but in reality it's the authority that God the Father has granted him. So we could still say that and not necessarily have to say that Jesus is God in that particular argument. I understand that, and I actually agree with that logic. I think that's good. However, by the same token, we could understand that because a judge has to be righteous in his judgment, and the only one who's fully righteous enough to judge all of mankind, indeed all of the nations in Israel as well, is God, because of the quality that it requires to be the only one true righteous judge, namely God, then for God the Father to confer this quality upon his Son must mean that the Son shares that righteous quality in its fullness, and thus the Trinity comes back on the table in the subject as well, in the topic of discussion again. Yeshua must possess this righteous quality. He must be sinless in the fact that he alone can render a verdict. Otherwise, he can't stand in judgment over a sinner if he himself also is guilty of the transgressions that he's pronouncing judgment against. Understand what I mean? He's a righteous judge, but he's righteous in that he's sinless. He shares the same qualities as his Father. And thus, now we can see that he is true deity. Look at Matthew 25. Yeshua describing the Son of Man. Keep in mind that this Son of Man imagery is rooted in the Tanakh, in the book of Daniel, and in other passages that we're going to reference here in a moment. But let's look at Matthew 25, 31 and 32. Yeshua says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Aha, we've got this king sitting on a throne. Verse 32, before him will be gathered who? Israel only. Read it again. Before him will be gathered all the nations. This king, this righteous one, this ruler from the Ancient of Days, he will be, who comes and approaches the Ancient of Days, the Son of Man. He will, watch this, separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. What's he doing? He's rendering judgment. He's rendering judgment. He is separating people. I believe that this is the sheep and goats judgment that takes place just immediately prior to the establishment of the 1,000-year millennial kingdom here on earth, meaning it's after the tribulation, but it's before the millennium. So I believe that's when the time place is for this prophetic event. And this determines who gets in and who doesn't allow, who God refuses to allow to go into his kingdom for the 1,000-year reign. Of course, there'll be people that are born in that time period as well, but that's a different discussion. But for now, it's safe to say that God allows his righteous king Messiah, to separate all the nations one from another. God allows this judgment. Now, God is the judge that we read about in the Tanakh, but now we see, here's an example of God conferring this judgment to the Son, to his righteous king. This isn't the only place we're going to see it, but this is our starting place. Let's turn now to the book of Romans. I suppose I should have had Acts in there first, but no. Yeah, Acts, because Acts comes before Romans. I'm out of order with my tabs, so just forgive me. This is Paul speaking, and Paul has also come to this understanding through the Spirit of Messiah opening his eyes that when Paul read through his Tanakh, he understood that God is judge. God is the righteous judge. And yet at the same time, watch this. What does Paul say in Romans 2? We know that the judgment of God rightly falls on those who practice such things. It is the judgment of God, Paul says. But let's keep reading.